So I'll let you decide who wants to go first.
I guess I came to the right place, eh?
I'm afraid you are.
Don't be afraid, I'm not.
Perfect. Okay, Minister, go ahead. You have 10 minutes for opening
Okay,
statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss the main estimates and talk a little about my mandate letter and what it means for Canadians. Following my remarks, my Chief Financial Officer, Marty Muldoon, will provide a brief presentation on these estimates, which I think will be useful for the committee. As Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard, I'm responsible for managing Canada's fisheries and aquaculture and protecting mariners and safeguarding our waters. A big part of my job is making strategic investments and ensuring strong financial management within my portfolio. Marty will go into a bit more detail on what the DFO's and the Coast Guard's 2016-2017 main estimates, which total $2.2 billion. This figure represents a 19% increase over last year's and is mainly due to funding for infrastructure projects and acquiring Coast Guard vessels. To be more specific, I'm seeking $809.7 million in capital, mostly for procurement in fleet machinery, and equipment. $65.5 million in grants and contributions, mostly to support our Aboriginal strategies and governance program, as well as our fisheries protection program, and $1.2 billion in operating and salaries and other operating expenditures. Additional funding that's related to the recently tabled budget will be sought through supplementary estimates. And while I have your attention, I want to speak about what Budget 2016 means for my department and how it relates to my mandate. So over $197 million was set aside for ocean and freshwater science, monitoring and research activities. This represents the fulfillment of a key commitment and the largest investment of its kind in fisheries and ocean science in a generation. This funding will allow us to hire new research scientists, biologists, and technicians, and invest in new technology and build important partnerships. Taken together, it will help us make more informed decisions about our oceans, waterways, and fisheries. DFO, along with Natural Resources Canada, will receive over $81 million for important marine conservation activities, including designating new marine protected areas under the Oceans Act. We will also receive funding to maintain and upgrade federal infrastructure properties such as Canadian Coast Guard bases, and an additional $149 million will help improve infrastructure at federally owned small craft harbors. DFO is one of 7 departments and agencies that will share over $129 million to help our infrastructure adapt to a changing climate and help communities become more resilient to the impacts of climate change. In terms of investments for Indigenous peoples, DFO will receive over $33 million to extend the Atlantic and Pacific Integrated Commercial Fisheries Initiatives. This program will help First Nations access commercial fisheries and build sustainable commercial fishing enterprises. Northerners, including Inuit, will also receive $40 million in federal funding to help build strong, diversified, and sustainable economies across the 3 territories. One area that will benefit from this investment is the fisheries sector. In terms of Coast Guard investments, reopening the Kitsilano Coast Guard facility in Vancouver is a top priority. Over $23 million was set aside in the budget to reopen Kitsilano and expand its search and rescue services to include marine emergency response. The facility will also provide emergency response training to our partners, including Indigenous groups, and serve as a regional incident command post in the event of a significant marine incident. The Coast Guard will also receive $6 million to carry out a technical assessment of the Manolis L shipwreck off of Newfoundland and Labrador, which began leaking fuel in 2013. Funding for this assessment will help us to find a permanent solution to this issue. The Coast Guard was identified as one of several departments requiring additional funding to carry out critical mission services. A $500 million fund managed by Treasury Board will help us address things like asset rust out. Once funding decisions are made, amounts will be submitted for parliamentary approval through the estimates process. I sincerely believe that the funding I'm seeking through the main estimates, along with the funding laid out in the budget, will help me achieve my mandate and put Canada on a path to shared prosperity and a cleaner and greener economy. Before I turn the floor over to Mr. Muldoon, I just want to say I appreciate everyone running down here after votes today, and I'm glad. I know it took some scheduling challenges to finally get here, but I'm glad that I'm here and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Tutu. Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. So we've circulated a short deck, a presentation that I'll refer to if you wish to follow along. I'm going to begin on slide 3. This is a replication of the slide. Most of you will recall that we were just here about 2.5–3 weeks ago on our supplementary estimate C from the previous supply cycle, so I won't dwell on this slide. If we jump to slide 4, I'll just spend a moment and I'll link a number of numbers that are going to come up as I roll along through the presentation. So you can see this particular presentation that we face every year is an interesting one to try and follow the supply cycle and how it affects us. If we look at where we are on the time chart on slide 4, we're smack in the middle of having tabled and received royal assent on the main estimates and the interim supply for those main estimates. That was all occurring during the months of February and March. As well, the government tabled Budget 2016. We're ahead of that as we roll into what these main estimates include for today's discussion. So I'll be trying to figure out how to answer questions where they may be relevant to the Budget 2016, but those items will all come in future supplementary estimate exercises that are out to the right on this particular chart. A couple of numbers to follow along. If I could take you all the way back to last year, top left corner, $1.889 billion. That number I'm going to show you again shortly. You'll see in each of the successive quarters we increased our estimates to operate with, ending the year with $2.39 billion. And now we're asking you to consider our main estimates for 16-17, where the "you are here" arrow points down, at 2.241. Just a slight drop from last year's ending position, but a rather marked increase from the last year's starting position of 1.889. I'll explain that in a minute. The primary driver, of course, will be no surprise. Let's move to the next slide. So already covered in the minister's remarks, and again, I've just highlighted, we're smack in between opening with our main estimates, but not yet able to portray the increases that will come in year. That's the essence of this slide. Let's move to slide 6 and just take a minute here. So I just bored you with a couple of interesting numbers. Let's see them again here, and then I'll explain a little bit about how the estimates are working for the organization. So the minister highlighted that we are proposing for your consideration $2.2 billion in main estimates. The increase over last year's starting point, or the 1889 number that I showed you, that's a $352 million increase. And then if we look at how this table is sort of a replication right out of the printed main estimates. You would remember that from seeing the Part 2s in the bigger books that you have access to. The top 3 numbers in this table, these are the numbers the committee will be asked to support. The next 2, the rows called with the S beside them, those are statutory, and they're not actually a voted item. They're a number that is provided to us under the various acts. So the employee benefit plans is a number provided directly to us, and you'll notice the final item, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans salary and motor car allowance. by the very structure of the way the minister's offices work in a departmental setting, this very small number, and it is literally, there are no extra thousands, this number comes from two portions of the parliamentary process. There's a Salaries Act for the minister's augmented salary being a minister, and there's the Parliament of Canada Act, which allows for the small item here for motor car allowance. You see this year that we have a statutory increase of $1,400, a very small increase. Those amounts are, again, provided to us. They go through the main estimates, but they're not part of the voting structure. So the minister already gave you the summary at the bottom. That the big players here, I'm going to go through a few of them, are the Federal Infrastructure Initiative funding from Budget 2015. This is year two. Budget 2014. This is year two of that. As well, often before this committee, we are talking about the ebbs and flows of the national shipbuilding strategy. So I'm going to talk about how that is moving along. And every year we need a top up. I just was here, as you remember, in Sub C talking about the fuel for the Coast Guard. It's around $15 to $20 million every year that we need on top of the base funding that we have for fuel for Coast Guard icebreaking and other services. So if I could ask you to join me on slide 7. Here are the actual numbers behind that $351 million increase. So just take a couple of minutes on a few of them that are most notable. Number one on the list, federal infrastructure, $291 million. Fisheries and Oceans was a recipient of an approval of $551 million over 2 years. This is year two. So that number plus the third number down of 25.4 for the lifeboats for the Canadian Coast Guard. Those two numbers combined are year two of FII. So you'll quickly do the math in your head. That's $316 million. I'm already over the $315 million increase because that increase is a net number. I'm going to take away a little bit here in a minute. $181.8 million for the Coast Guard's offshore fishery science vessels. This is actually turning now to be a very good story. Those of you that are members of the committee from the last few years, you'd know I've been here numerous times saying we're moving money out to future years because the shipbuilding isn't keeping pace. And I mentioned at the Sub C that, in fact, it's turned the corner. So we have three of these vessels, 3 copies of this particular vessel that are going to come off the production line of the Vancouver shipyards. This is the next installment. When I was here 3 weeks ago, we were bringing in $116 million of the expenditures for 15-16. Now you see we're up to 181 for this particular year, and we'll start to see those vessels, that production, reaching its conclusion very, very shortly. Fourth down, there's that incremental funding again. It was just in the Sub C, and it's again here. And again, a reminder, this is an up to funding limit for us. So if we spend it burning fuel in those vessels, serving Canadians, we can access this funding. If we don't, it stays in the fiscal framework. If we move, before I move to the bottom of the page, I want to re-enunciate. So this federal infrastructure money that's on this page is only for all infrastructure funding not announced just recently in Budget 2016. We'll likely be back to see you very shortly in Subs A to bring in whatever funding was allocated to us. And you'll recall that one of the big chunks was $149 million for the Small Craft Harbor program and a further $49 million for the Canadian Coast Guard for very specific greening initiatives at some of its facilities where we're going to look at solar power as an alternative source of energy. Bottom, I mentioned in my remarks, we've got a lot of money coming in. That adds up to well over $351 million. Some of our funding profile at the bottom of this page, and I'm going to move to the next slide, is actually funding that's leaving our organization. On this particular page, we notice that it's called a decrease in the funding profile. This is not a takeaway. What's happening here is we've had an extremely successful procurement with Bell for the light and medium lift helicopters. I think I regaled you last time we were together that we've now taken delivery of the first 15 of the light lift. Those are coined the Bell 429s, and we're now in this year starting to ramp up towards the Bell 412s, which is our medium lift platform. In addition, this year with this new money that's profiled, that is after this particular year, is we're going to buy the flight simulator for the training. So the 66-8 leaving our organization is a signal that the program of acquisition for those first 15 is complete, and we therefore have to reduce our approvals in our main estimates to the new lower expenditures that will occur in 16-17 as we move forward. Again, a good story. These have been delivered on time and on budget. So again, a few more here on slide 8. Pre the budget announcement, which the minister just noted on Pacific and Atlantic integrated commercial fisheries, we had not had a renewal for this particular program, $33 million. So from a main estimates process, I have no choice but to actually seek the reduction of our main estimates authorities by that amount until that program, and in this case, was renewed. So in supplementary estimates A or B in the coming term, we'll come back and seek the renewal of this from this committee's support. Next on the list, the reduction of offshore oceanographic science vessel funding. This is actually not a reduction to the program. All this is you remember I just mentioned on the previous page 3 copies of the Fisheries science vessel. This one, as I would call it for short, the OOSV, it's due to come off the line after those first 3. Now that that particular production line and the sequencing of when those will arrive to us is more clearly known, we're now taking this funding of 23.3 and we're pushing it out to the future years where we know we'll need it when this particular vessel goes into production. Small craft harbors just below, if you were following along what I was saying about the federal infrastructure, tremendous amount of investment being made in federal infrastructure in the small craft harbor program. In this particular instance, 22.2, about, I think it was budget 2014, there was a $40 million incremental investment made in small craft harbor over 2 years. 15-16 was the end of that 2 years. And so I have to reduce the authorities available to us by this 22.2. We successfully delivered on the initiatives for that funding, but we're just reducing how much we're allowed to spend. So what we have in 16-17 and beyond ties itself to the base program, plus the 2 rounds of federal infrastructure funding that I spoke of in my remarks. Last, vessel life extensions and midlife modernizations. So these are the 2 major service investments that we use to keep existing Coast Guard fleet in service and operating. And again, tied to the timing of when our fleet replacements occur, we move the vessel life money forward when we know that vessels will be available for the refit work and or when we know that a new vessel is coming in to replace the ones we have in service. So this is not a takeaway, it's just simply a timing issue, moving money to the right. Last slide, slide 9. So as I mentioned on the timeline slide, we've received on March 24th the Royal Assent for interim supplies. So we have 3/12 of our operating funding from the main estimates. As a result of the process here today and ultimately the decision of government, we'll hope that the main estimates, the rest of the main estimates are released to us, and that would represent the other 9/12 of the year. And I guess just before I sign off, Mr. Chair, and thank the committee for this opportunity, I'll only just reference that there are a series of slides that follow in the annex section, and what they are is another way for this committee to look at how our funding is divided. Very complicated budgets in the main estimates, but what this does is it breaks it down for you by strategic outcome and shows you how the $2.2 billion that we're referring to in the main estimates is partitioned by the 4 big strategic outcomes the organization has set out to achieve, and it breaks it down even more granularly in the pie charts by the types of programming. So you can see how much goes into, say, economic prosperity. How much does the Coast Guard contribute to that, for an example? So I'll leave you with those, and we're pleased to answer any questions and look forward to the dialogue over the remainder of our time in this appearance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Muldoon. Thank you, and thank you, Minister Tutu, and the rest of your staff with you here today. So we're starting with the first question, our first round of questioning, 7 minutes each. Our first question goes to the government side. Mr. Ken McDonald will be the first. Mr. McDonald, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, welcome, Minister. First question deals with the Fisheries Act. In your mandate letter, one of the department's priorities is reform to the Fisheries Act. In 2012, some changes were made to the Act in regards to habitat protections, but still these changes were minor. The Act as it is today is out of date and does not align with the needs of those involved in the fisheries across Canada. When can we expect the modernisation of the Act, and what steps do you see taking to meet the modern-day needs of today's fisheries?
Thank you for the question. I know the Fisheries Act, I think we all know it's an essential tool to support conservation and the protection of fish and fish habitat and the sustainability of our fisheries. You know, I take very seriously my mandate to restore the Fisheries Act protections that were lost. Look forward to consulting with scientists, environmentalists, Indigenous peoples, and all stakeholders in finding the best path forward to safeguard our oceans and waterways. You know, and for now, I intend to focus the Fisheries Act review on these lost protections. And I guess since my appointment as minister, I've traveled across the country and listened to a whole range of Canadians on their views of this review. They were constructive discussions and very informative for me, you know, and my departmental officials. I felt that it was important for me to go out and hear firsthand from stakeholders, you know, what their concerns and their issues were to help me better understand the file. And we'll continue to engage with Indigenous people, other Canadians throughout the review process. You know, to hear, you know, what they like and what needs to be changed in the Act to restore these strong protections for our fisheries. And currently my officials are reviewing options to undertake this review. And I can say at this time, no, that we will hold consultations with Indigenous peoples, other Canadians, and all stakeholders. You know, the specific processes and timelines will be announced before the summer commences. So it's something that I know is important. I've heard it from everybody from coast to coast to coast, and I look forward to, you know, not only bringing back these lost protections, but also modernizing. As we all know, it's quite an old act, and you know, I've heard from all kinds of users of the act that it does need to be modernized as well. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question, Mr. Minister, deals with aquaculture. When you appeared before the Senate Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, the topic of aquaculture was discussed and the drafting of an Aquaculture Act. The aquaculture sector falls under multiple departments, falls under Fisheries and Oceans, Environment and Climate Change, and Agriculture and Agri-Food. In this light, the industry struggles to find its place in terms of regulation and legislation on the federal level. Can we look forward to a new modern act that pertains directly to aquaculture that will involve the cooperation of all these departments and ministries?
Absolutely. I think you know, that's again in my. I think I've met with more aquaculture industry stakeholders since I've taken office, because they seem to follow me around everywhere I go. But it's fine. I totally understand the issues and concerns that they have. I mean, if you, like I said, look at modernizing the Act. You know, I don't think aquaculture is even mentioned in the Fisheries Act, and you know, they've made it, you know, very clear that, you know, we need to modernize it to recognize that industry. You know, I think traveling from, you know, in both the East and the West Coast, you know, those jurisdictions are very eager to promote growth in that industry for, you know, for their jurisdictions, and finding ways to modernize the Act to reflect this, I say, new industry as far as the Act goes is going to be important. And you know, whether it's creating a separate Aquaculture Act, or, you know, find a way to modernize the existing Act to include the, you know, those concerns and those issues that they have is yet to be determined. Thanks.
Mr. Clark? My next question, Mr. Minister, would deal with something that, of course, fishery is very important to my province, but just as importantly, I guess, is the small craft harbours funding. In the budget, it is highlighted that an increase of $163.2 million will be allocated to small craft harbours around the country. A couple of questions to that is, how will this additional funding be allocated? What are the criteria to determine the allocation? And is it a need-based allocation, and will the areas of Canada with the highest volume of designated small craft harbours be taken into consideration?
Sorry, can I ask you to repeat the last part again?
Yeah. Is it a need-based allocation, and will the areas of Canada with the highest volume of designated small craft harbours be taken into consideration?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know. I think that's, again, something I heard in my travels. It's quite near and dear to everybody's heart, whether it be the fishing industry, the aquaculture industry, and you know, all the stakeholders. You know, and I certainly recognize the important role that small craft harbors and commercial fishing play and aquaculture in many communities on our coasts. The amount, my understanding, is $148.6 million that was recently announced in the budget for small craft harbor improvements. I think clearly demonstrates our commitment to ensure that our harbors are safe and accessible for commercial fish harvesters across Canada. And we also value the significant contributions to, you know, I said I've met with a number of these harbor authorities in my travels, and, you know, they're very, very dedicated, you know, a lot of them who dedicate their own personal time to ensure our harbors are safe and well managed.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I appreciate it. Sorry, Minister, we're up on that time. We have to go to the opposition now for 7 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
Mr. Straw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. It's good to finally see you here. We were starting to get jealous. You've been to the Senate twice, and we hadn't seen you yet, so I'm glad that you've made some time for us today. I wanted to talk as well, Mr. McDonald mentioned the Fisheries Act review, and you said in response to Senator Hubley, and again now just to Mr. McDonald, you said, quote, "One of the things that everyone mentioned to me is they wanted to see these loss protections restored. We're happy to hear that. We're happy to restore these loss protections." Pretty much that everyone I talked to wanted that. I guess you haven't spoken to farmers and municipalities in my riding in British Columbia, where for years they wanted DFO to get out of their drainage ditches to allow them to farm. The only way that they can farm is if they are allowed to drain their land so that they can get onto that land and maintain it. Grow their crops, and so they were quite happy, as were the municipalities like Chilliwack, like Kent, like the village of Harrison Hot Springs, very happy to see that drainage policy reviewed and to allow, get DFO out of those man-made drainage ditches and allow them to farm. Don't you think it's a bit of a waste of the resources of your department to get back into the farming ditches in British Columbia and other parts of the country, which will, you know, given the limited resources of government and your department, necessarily move fisheries officers away from productive fisheries like the Fraser River or others that actually need protection?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I'm glad I'm finally here as well. I think the amendments, there were some amendments that people were concerned with the loss protections, but there are also some positive amendments that were made in there. Like I said, I met with Canadians from all three coasts, and some of them, I've heard say that we should just revert back to how it was before, and I think, we're looking at options to restore loss protections in the near future, and that balances with our engagement to proceed with an open and inclusive process. So, if there's, I don't want to just jump and say, okay, we're going to revert back to the old, because not everything, not all the changes took away some protections. There were also some good some positive things in there too. So I think, if if I just went and changed it back to what it was, that takes that away. You know, and like I said, I've committed to, you know, consult with Canadians on this. So, you know, if we're having consultations and those people in your riding want to come and make those observations and recommendations for the review panel, that'd be more than welcome to.
I hope you do hear from them. I wanted to jump to another part of your mandate letter. Spoke about Aboriginal consultation, and this is perhaps an opportunity to get you to broaden that in light of last week's Supreme Court decision on the Daniels ruling regarding Métis and non-status Indians. While this didn't give Métis and non-status Indians Section 35 rights, there are going to be significant implications for the government and I would suggest for the department. So what are your expectations as to what the impacts will be on DFO? And do you anticipate that this decision will have an impact on fisheries allocations, allotment by your department? Do you anticipate this happening in the short, medium, or long term? Anything you can enlighten this committee on in that regard would be appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think it was like you said, it was a important decision that was handed down last week. And you know, the government's going to be taking a look at it, going through it, and determining, you know, exactly what our obligations are under that. You know, for me to say right now one way or the other, it would be a little premature to do that until it's been thoroughly reviewed by the government. But you know, we will be taking a close look at it and determining what their obligations are as a result of that.
Thank you. Perhaps a future appearance will deal with that. I wanted to talk briefly about Thompson River steelhead. It's an issue in British Columbia, again, a conservation issue. There is significant concern with the Thompson River steelhead stocks. While they fall under the jurisdiction of the province of British Columbia, there are issues with bycatch that will affect Fraser River fisheries, and the chum fishery specifically. And there are some that have suggested that in order to protect the steelhead, we need to close or delay the chum fishery, which obviously would have a large economic impact. I met with some angling groups just this morning from British Columbia who are concerned about the lack of dialogue between DFO, the province, commercial, rec, and Aboriginal fishermen on the issue. So I'm wondering, perhaps, I'm not sure if you have this card in the book or if you would undertake to get back to us on what part you feel that the department can play to facilitate that sort of discussion so that we can advance the conservation of the steelhead while at the same time protecting the interests of fishermen on the Fraser River.
I think, you know, everyone, I don't have a problem sitting down and discussing issues with other stakeholders. I know, like you said, this is an issue with the province. I've met, like I said, with all stakeholders, whether it be recreational fishers, anglers, Indigenous groups, you know, everyone committed to, you know, we want to be open to dialogue. Actually, I met with a group this morning that was, you know, their request. We've been trying to get in the door and no one's talked to us, and I've said, you know, I'll let you know, and I did it when I was in New Brunswick, you know, with a First Nations group over there. Just say, like, our officials are here to work with you on you know, whatever the issues are, anything we can do to help make progress on certain issues. You know, we're all in this together, and you know, by having that dialogue is important to be able to make progress, and that's the only way it's going to happen.
Thank you, Minister. All right. Also now Mr. Stetsky for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Minister, for being here, and thank you for restoring the Kitsilano Coast Guard Station. Very important for marine and environmental safety on the coast. I want to talk about Comox Station just a little bit. So will you act in good faith and postpone closing the MCTS Comox Station until you are satisfied there are no outstanding workload, training, or other marine safety issues?
Thank you for that question. I was anticipating getting asked that question here today.
It's an important one.
Yeah. You know, the closure of Comax, like, you know, I've said it over and over, you know, it won't diminish the safety services of the Coast Guard. I think, you know, this is something that's been part of a project to modernize and consolidate our MCTS centers since 2007. This is the final stage in that process. You know, I know, you know, it's never easy. You know, and I think, you know, by you know, moving forward, that you know, give some certainty to the employees that have been struggling. You know, they were notified, I think, about a little over 2 years ago, around 2 years ago, that the center would be closing, and it's just like we're at the final stage of this project that's been going on since 2007.
Well, as you know, our preference would be to keep it open, but turning to the Fisheries Act for a bit, it is an old act, but it's a very important one for the environment. I was the regional manager for Fish and Wildlife for southeastern BC, and it was a sad day when we saw the back of the last DFO staff leaving our region. So the act is really important, and particularly, will you restore the habitat protection provisions that were gutted by the previous government, and they were? I'm referring specifically to restoring Section 35 of the Fisheries Act.
Okay, thank you. I think my mandate letter is pretty clear on that, to restore the loss protections, and you know, I'm sure, you know, once we decide on the process of how that review is going to be conducted, I'm quite confident that we're, you know, through that review processes, that's something that's going to be mentioned over and over again, and you know, I'm committed. You know, I've been mandated by the Prime Minister to bring back those loss protections, and we'll do that in the best way possible.
Keep an eye particularly on Section 35.
Yeah.
And bring it back. So last month, the United Fish and Allied Workers Union sent the minister a letter outlining the dire situation facing West Coast fishery workers. They say the bulk of the profits from West Coast commercial fisheries are going to quota and license holders and one large processor, as the outsourcing of nearly 500 families supporting jobs in the Prince Rupert plant shows. Corporate consolidation of licenses and quotas threaten the livelihood of small boat independent fish harvesters. The letter asks the minister to strike an independent panel to travel to BC coastal communities to talk with the communities, commercial fishers, and plant workers, and develop made in a BC solution. And do you intend to do that?
You know, I'll just be honest with you, I haven't seen that letter yet. Okay. You know, but when I do see it, then it's. I will be having a close look at it, and I'm not going to commit to anything until I see what the letter actually asks.
Okay. When will the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency review process be properly revised so major energy and other projects are reviewed using a climate lens?
Thank you. I mean, we both know that process falls under environment and climate change, and you know, Minister McKenna, you know, I'm sure is just like me, and my mandate to review the Fisheries Act. You know, they're working. Our officials are working together to figure out the best way forward to conduct that review and get it done. And you know, again, I'm hoping by the summer that there's some. A roadmap for that will be unveiled.
So, as you know, climate change certainly affects fish.
I know.
Seriously.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stetsky. Now we'll go over to the government side. Ms. Jordan, for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today, Minister. I'm going to focus my questions on 3 specific areas. Start with small craft harbors. As you know, that's extremely important to us on the south shore of Nova Scotia, and the increase in funding for $149 million. My question is, my colleague alluded to it earlier, and how is that money going to be allocated? And is there any plans for long-term strategic planning for the development of small craft harbors? Because sometimes they've we do things maybe on a emergency basis, and I think long-term planning might be a better way to go. And I'm just wondering if there's any thought given to how that money is going to be allocated in the future.
Thank you for the question. I know my officials are currently finalizing small craft harbor project list for the 16-17 fiscal year. And I think, thanks to the additional 148.6 million in new funding received under our budget this year for the next 2 years, we'll be able to make a lot more people happy and do more of the much-needed projects this coming year. The funding priority is given to safety-related projects at core fishing harbors. Things to address like rust out and improving operations and conditions of the harbor. Projects at core fishing harbors are selected based on the following criteria. One is safety or risk management, functional need, harbor activity, and here we go, long-term plans, economic benefit, and the state of preparedness of the project. And these projects are carried out, across the country, with the majority in the Atlantic provinces, where there's obviously more of them, and I think about 70% of the harbors are located out there.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to my next question. Would be with regards to you did actually mention the shipwreck off Newfoundland. Abandoned and derelict vessels are a huge concern for coastal communities, and currently the only recourse that the government has to deal with them is if they're an environmental or a hazard or navigable waters, blocking navigable water. There needs to be more done in terms of what we can do with these vessels that are just being left. And I just wondered if you have any thoughts on further action by DFO with regards to the problem we have with almost over 600 derelict and abandoned vessels in Canada right now.
Yeah, I think, we all know that I think I've been asked a few times in the House on one like the Catherine Spirit, for example. We know that there's an issue out there. The Coast Guard will deal with wrecks or derelict or abandoned vessels where there's a pollution risk coming from it. And like I said, Transport Canada will deal with it if it's posing a hazard to safe navigation. I think our system, that we have here in Canada is, based on the polluter pay principle. We're going to work in collaboration with our federal and local partners to hold these negligent vessel owners accountable to the full extent of the law, to be able to deal with it. Having said that, I think we, our officials are sitting down and looking at how we can improve on that process, or things that may be missing, and these are things that we're discussing at an officials level right now between Coast Guard and Transport Canada.
Thank you. And I guess my final question is on MPAs and your mandate letter on marine protected areas. When the staff were in earlier for meetings, I believe it was suggested that it was both exciting and terrifying, was I think the words that they used, because of the mandate to take it to 10% in the next couple of years. And I guess, I know this is something that has to be done in cooperation with the Minister of Environment as well as your department. How do you see the MPA process going forward, and particularly with regards to your department?
Okay, well, I think, it is both exciting and terrifying. That's something that I've discussed with all stakeholders that deal with with the water in our oceans, whether it be fisheries, environmental groups, oil and gas, all the provinces and territories, reps that I've met with. And I think the one thing that I was very happy to hear is that, all across the board, everyone is supportive of us reaching our targets and are committed to work with us to help us achieve those targets. I know, and to me that was very exciting, because usually when you get all these different groups sitting around the table, it's because they disagree on certain things. But it was nice to see that here's something where there is some common ground from all sides, which was nice to see compared to some of the other discussions that I had with them on other issues. I think together, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, we're developing a plan on, how to achieve, and I've said this all along, it's very ambitious targets, and we're hoping to be able to launch how that's going to unfold within the next 3 to 4 weeks, if not sooner.
No, I'm afraid not, sorry. Although you have 2 seconds left, you can,
Okay.
if you want to say goodbye, you can.
If you want me to be quicker, just let me know.
We are now into our 5-minute round, so Mr. Arnold, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here along with your staff today. It's good to see you. You obviously wear your seal tie very proudly everywhere you go. I've noticed that, and just wondering if you've got, you support the seal harvest in your area, particularly, especially. Do you support it elsewhere in the country, and is there cabinet support for the seal hunt, excuse me, in other parts of the country, especially if it has significant effect on overall fisheries management, such as salmon and cod stocks?
Well, absolutely. I've met with the sealing industry, seal harvesters from Newfoundland, from Quebec, from the Magdalen Islands, and I've committed to them that we as a government do support the sustainable, humane, and well-regulated seal harvest. And I said, you use the word hunt, and I always tell my staff when they say that, no, it's not a hunt, it's a harvest. I think that's an industry that's taken quite a hit over the last number of decades, thanks to market blockages to the EU. We're able to negotiate an exemption for Aboriginal Indigenous exemption, so that through our program, that the market certification program, that we'll be able to import those products into the EU. I've talked with, in my meetings with other stakeholders in southern Canada. I said, this is, we want to do what we can to try and maximize on that exemption. I met with the folks from Quebec, what was it, a couple of weeks ago when they were in my...
January, I'm sure.
Yeah, not 2-3 weeks ago. And, one of the things that, that they said that they've come to realize is that, the sealing industry is not a huge industry. And they're kind of like going at each other, trying to take the other guy down and get their market. And, I think they've, they told me that they realize that it's, we're small enough, we need to work together to try and expand the industry and market access in different parts of the world, and that's something that I've committed to work with them on.
Yeah, I come from a background as a hunter as well, so I've learned to switch the terminology over to a harvest as well. But I'm also wondering about the West Coast as well. Seal predation on some of the salmon stocks has been noted as a significant impact. There, we'd have to look more at a seal cull, but can we, would you support that if it's sustainable and as part of a scientific management of the overall fisheries resource?
Well, I think, before any decision is made on, on any species, the science would have to be done to determine it. And if the science says that there is an issue that we need to deal with, then we'll look at the best way to deal with that issue. But, without the science to be able to show us and tell us, exactly, what the problem is, and, what the facts are, it would be premature for me to say one way or the other on that. But it's based on science. We've committed to reinvest in science. So hopefully we can work with not just DFO officials, but look at I've discussion with the Pacific Salmon Foundation, looking at ways where we can partner up on science, so that we can have a broader base of science to be able to draw from in order to make better sound decisions.
Okay.
30 seconds.
The marine protected areas, it's becoming a forefront issue. Have you got any direction so far as to what might be included or what might not be, or what might be excluded as acceptable uses or activities within these marine protected areas?
Like I said, in my travels, I've heard that just about from everybody. I've, like I said, very impressed. I've been very impressed with the expertise and enthusiasm and contributions, that everyone's bringing to the table on this. I think right now we're advancing 5 areas of interest towards designation, including Hecate Strait, Queen Charlotte Sound, glass sponge reefs in the Pacific. There's one up in the Beaufort Sea by Tuck, I believe, right? Yeah, and both of which hopefully will be established this year. We're also looking at St. Anne's Bank, Laurentian Channel, and Banque des Américains, and all in the Atlantic Canada are expected to follow the following year. We're, I think, early on in like the consultation stages, with the different jurisdictions, is to look at, where do we go for areas next, and and again, I've committed to everybody that it's not going to be done behind closed doors or without consultation. It's going to be through an open and transparent manner with consultation with stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We're now going to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Minister. It's interesting to hear you refer to some of your transactions as exciting and terrifying. I'm sure that visits to the West Coast probably fall into that category because, of course, we have a very active advocacy group out there, or groups. There's many of them. First, just a quick question on the Kitts Coast Guard base. We're reopening it. That was a rock star announcement, to be sure. Will the base also have spill response capabilities?
Absolutely, it will. I mean,
Good.
I think what we've done is, not only just reopen to the search and rescue, but I think some of the incidents, you look at the English Bay incident and with departmental officials sitting down with other stakeholders in the area, they knew we need to find a way to enhance those services there. And this is also something that I've heard, look at having as a training center. We've heard from First Nations group up and down the coast saying that they want to be involved. They're there, give us the training, and we have the ability to be your first responders. So, I mean, this is all, we're not just reopening this like 3 times, enhancing it. So it's a great...
coordination in Metro Vancouver is quite important too, because you have so many different municipalities and jurisdictions there. It didn't take long after our Environment Minister announced the go-ahead, or at least a hurdle had been cleared by wood fiber LNG, that I heard from some folks along Howe Sound who were concerned that some of the data that had been used in that decision was from DFO from 1991. Extremely old data, because that was simply the latest that you had. You can, straighten that out if that's incorrect. But it does lead to a general question, sir. You're being asked to restore a lot, your habitat, protections, et cetera, but I'm wondering if you actually have a strategy for restoring the DFO itself to an organization like it used to be, the source of accurate and objective science.
Well, I mean, I think, like I said in my opening comments, our recent budget announcement of $197 million over 5 years starting this coming year is the single biggest investment in science and ocean science in a generation. And, I think that shows that we are committed, to ensure that we have the resources we need to be able to do adequate science and, to be able to make evidence-based, science-based decisions. Like I said, I don't want to just bring it back to how it was. I think, the Prime Minister always said better is always possible. I'm looking at ways to try and partner up, like I said, with these everyone else does science. So like, why do we have to reinvent the wheel? Someone else is doing it. Maybe we can find ways where we can partner up. We, have a partner, give them, $20,000 for a science project, and they can turn it into $100,000 worth of science. So we get more bang for our buck, and again, a broader base of science in order to make decisions from.
One more brief question then. With respect to the Cohen Commission, as the only Liberal on this committee west of Ontario, Cohen is something that I'll be asked to follow fairly closely. And I noticed in the mandate letter you're charged with acting on the Cohen Commission, which is to me a little bit different than implementing it, implementing those recommendations. So does that suggest then that there are doors open to varying the direction that Justice Cohen was trying to set?
Well, I don't blame you for bringing that up, and I expect you to. To me, that's your job, and we have to respect that. I think, we're committed on acting on the recommendations of the Cohen Commission on restoring the sockeye salmon stocks on the Fraser River. I actually had a meeting with Justice Cohen when I was in BC before Christmas. It was supposed to be an hour, and it went on for about an hour and a half. It was a very interesting individual to sit down and talk to, and hoping to be out there again soon, at which time I hope to be able to provide detailed information on implementation and progress to date, and to announce a way forward on outstanding recommendations. I think right now, as of now, about 31 of the recommendations have been implemented in whole or in part, and so looking forward to more to come in the near future. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Minister, again. Mr. Barlow, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Sopak, for letting me sub in today. Minister, thanks very much for being here. My question is a little bit of a different direction. I just want to put out a comparison here. As of now, about 740,000 barrels of oil a day are being tanked into eastern Canada, United States, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. So about 3,900 tankers per year. That's about $17 billion leaving the Canadian economy, going to foreign oil producers. That would cover about half of our federal deficit. By comparison, the West Coast has about 246 tankers per year, about 1.3% of the total commercial vessels going into the West Coast. The Liberal government doesn't seem to have much of an issue with the tanker traffic off the East Coast, which is 16 times higher than the tanker traffic off the West Coast. So I'd like to ask, why is it okay for Atlantic Canada and Quebec to have crude oil off their waters, but you have a unilateral tanker ban that is going to be blocking Northern Gateway and is going to be impacting jobs in BC, Saskatchewan, Alberta. Why such a difference between the attitude of the West Coast tanker traffic and the East Coast tanker traffic?
Well, that's, that you're talking about the tanker ban on the West Coast, and, that falls under, the Minister of Transportation.
But it is in your mandate letter to
work with him
to follow through on this. So as Fisheries and Oceans...
He's the lead minister on that. Our officials have been in discussions on where they're going, and I'm sure he's going to be bringing something forward for us to have a look at.
So if the Minister of Transport is the lead, I can understand that. It does say in your mandate letter that you will work with the Minister of Transport. What is your view, or what would be your input on this? Is this something that you are supporting? Is this something that you want to have a more lengthy discussion with?
Well, I mean, my own personal view on it is irrelevant because I'm not here as an individual. I'm here as a minister of the Crown. I know, as you're probably aware, there's quite diverse views on the moratorium, and I'm interested in finding a way forward with. Minister Garneau, that balances, the need, and like we heard, all BC residents are all about the environment, but also look at ways that we can grow our economy. So we'll be looking, how defining that balance.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump in there. And you talk about growing your economy. The best way to grow our economy is with jobs, and this is going to impact a significant number of jobs in 3 provinces. But in your mandate letter, it says you will work with the Minister of Transport, Natural Resources, with this group of ministers, and you're saying you're not the lead minister. So what is going to be your input in this, if anything?
Well, there'll be, my understanding, we'll be sitting down, our officials, I think, are sitting down, looking at ways to move forward and, where to go and what we're going to do with it. And, when they come up with something for us to have a look at, then I'll be having a look at it.
Yeah, my concern with this, I guess, Minister, is, Northern Gateway was approved. An arbitrary tanker ban is put in. It's going to block that pipeline. Energy East gets approved by the NEB, goes through. Are we going to have a tanker ban off New Brunswick? Is that the next step? So I hope that you will be an active part of these discussions and moving forward, as we know how important these things are. And I know in your mandate letter, you're talking about how important it was for consultation, and I agree. I think that's extremely important. There was about 25 First Nations along the route of Northern Gateway who have become equity partners in the pipeline. Were they part of the consultation process when the tanker traffic ban was put in? Do you know?
Well, I was not aware if they were or not, but I know I did meet with, actually met with those individuals. Yeah, no, it was more recently than that. I think just within the last month and a half. And I know, like we've said in anything, that it's, there will be consultations that take place, and everyone who has concerns will have an opportunity to voice those concerns. I think that's, one of the things that we've heard over and over again is, we want to, ensure that we have a process in place that Canadians have confidence in, and through consultations and input from all stakeholders, we're going to be developing a plan that Canadians will have confidence in and be able to get our resources to market.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow, for the question. Thank you, Minister. Monsieur Finnegan, pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Being here today and to showing us the plans ahead. As you know, I'm from the riding of Miramichi Grand Lake, where it's Miramichi River is world famous for the Atlantic salmon. And recently, you accepted the recommendation from the Department of Fisheries and Ocean to continue the practice of catch and release as it was implemented for Atlantic salmon recreational fisheries in 2015. Could you explain to the committee how you came to this decision and specifically the scientific research that supports it, and also if you're willing to reassess this decision in the future? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know, I think the Atlantic salmon stocks have been steadily declining. I think it's probably, close to 70% decline since 1971. And, in 2014, as I'm sure you're aware, some years like the Miramichi River had the lowest returns on record. And, many of the salmon stocks are being, have been assessed as being endangered. I think rebuilding these stocks will require a concerted effort from, all stakeholders. I think until, the science shows us different, we'll continue with the no retention of Atlantic salmon in the Gulf region. And I'm hoping, with our investment in science in this budget, we'll be able to gather more information, more specific information, to be able to hopefully reassess, have more information to make, reassess that decision as in the future.
And to continue on that thought, some of my constituents are concerned that we don't have good, reliable data. And I know that you will be investing $197 million over 5 years in scientific research, and some of that will go into the Marguerite and the Restigouche and the Miramichi. Can you kind of elaborate on that? Just how, what approach we'll have to get better data so we can make better informed decisions?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think over the coming months, the department will be focusing on three main areas. One, looking at increasing in-river monitoring of salmon returns on selected rivers. One, trying to understand, more science on understanding survival at sea, and working with the Atlantic salmon science community to contribute to effective salmon management and conservation. I've met with the anglers when I was out in New Brunswick, and again, I say everyone does science and everyone wants to help to bring it back, and look forward to working with those groups to try and get the best information we can to move forward.
Thank you. And I don't know. So the Atlantic salmon was assessed as a special concern. And could you elaborate as to where is the next step a species at risk, and where we're at into that, I guess, scale? And what does it mean, a species at risk, if ever it was there for the anglers in Miramichi? Okay,
thank you. You stumped me on that one. I'll ask Trevor to respond to that, please.
Thank you, Minister. The salmon, Atlantic salmon, as you say, is assessed in a number of different ways depending on where it's found. So think of Bay of Fundy, think of Gulf of St. Lawrence. If we see a continued decline in any of the stocks, it will move. Depends on the way you look at it, sir, up the classification or down, but a worse status is if you move from special concern to threatened and ultimately to endangered. Obviously, we hope that's not the trend. The trends do not show that right now. The reason species are designated as special concern is that they require or demand or deserve special attention, so that they're not just one among others. The efforts are targeted much more towards their conservation, return, and science, and so on. We think, optimistically, that trends are holding. We do not, at this point, anticipate declines into threatened or endangered status. Obviously, Mother Nature has its way or her way, and we'll see. But right now, the trends are fairly positive.
Thank you. One more?
Did you?
I know we've been negotiating with the Greenland harvest of salmon. Could you tell us where we're at, and if there's going to be further negotiations in the coming year, and if we can, get them to get on this conservation trend instead of commercial harvest, as we have moved several years ago?
I mean, this is something that, we'll continue to raise with Greenland to work on trying to, come to an agreement, on that, because we recognize that that's where the salmon go, and that's where they're having, so we'll continue to be negotiating with them, to try and come up with a plan to deal with it, and so that they recognize, the concerns and the issue that we're facing in Atlantic Canada with salmon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Finnegan, and thank you, Mr. Swordfeger. Is that right? Yes. Thank you for your intervention as well, sir. Okay, Mr. Stetsky, for 3 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. Quick follow-up on Mr. Hardy's question about restoring DFO. 2002, we had 4 DFO staff in southeastern BC. The org chart showed 12. Today we have none. So absolutely, we would like to see some restoration. Questions on timing. When do you hope to have changes to the Fisheries Act back to Parliament?
I mean, like I said, hopefully, before too long, we'll come up with a plan on, how we feel the best way forward, to, do that review, and then, depend on the consultations that take place and, the feedback that we get to input into it. So, I mean, I don't want to say I can't really commit to any time. There's a lot that yet has to happen before a time limit or time frame can be nailed down.
I'd certainly encourage you to make it sooner rather than later, because it is an important piece of legislation. Cohen recommendations was touched on. When do you hope to have those fully implemented, and will you increase the budget so that they can be implemented if necessary?
Thank you. I mean, as I stated earlier, I hope to be in BC soon, to provide a little more detail on the implementation and progress to date. I think also, with our reinvestment in science, there'll be some additional resources, to help deal with some of the outstanding recommendations as well.
Time for another one?
Yes, you do.
Minute and a half. There are 2 aspects of the budget that have been reduced. There was a $30 million drop in Aboriginal strategies. I'm wondering how that might impact the ability of First Nations to participate in fisheries management. And the second one was the climate change adaptation program funding was expired and wasn't renewed. Given the risk climate change poses to fisheries, why wasn't that funding renewed? So climate change and Aboriginal strategies funding.
I think both of those programs, my understanding, were like an annual, and they were sunsetting. But both of them have been announced in the budget, so they will be reinstated. And that's like Mario was saying earlier that when we'll come back in estimates A or B, yes, where you'll see that funding getting put back in.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stetsky. Now, of course, I'm sorry.
Is there time for one more or no?
You have 8 seconds. Perhaps you'd like to say.
Long-term plan for derelict and abandoned vessels. Will you get a long-term plan in place nationally?
I think as I kind of answered that one earlier by saying that we're working with Transport Canada to identify.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate it. So now you'll have a chance again, Mr. Stetsky, in just a few moments. But we've exhausted round 2. We're going to go back to round 1 once more, and we're going to start with I think Mr. Morrissey. Yep, sir. Go ahead. 7 minutes.
7? Did you say? No. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the one of the issues with small craft harbors, from a maintenance perspective, is the inadequacy of the maintenance budget. I hear that from harbor authorities, which have been highly successful in co-managing these facilities. Could you tell us if there's been any? Will there be any increase out of the cap? We know the capital side, but the amount of dollars allocated towards the maintenance part of the budget by regions and zones?
I know this. I think this is doesn't deal with the ongoing maintenance. I know it's a challenge. I've met with many harbor authorities. Are that do express, the need to be able to find additional funding for maintenance. But this is strictly, like a one-time capital investment and not.
Yes, I'm
not
aware,
O&M.
but on the maintenance, because I understand that the maintenance allocations have actually been decreased over the past number of years. So what's the department's position on that going forward? The amount allocated towards the maintenance?
I know this is something that I've had discussions with Harbour authorities on, but I'll let Leslie take it from here.
Yeah. I would just supplement the minister's comments by noting that in terms of ongoing funding, as you note, we recognize that the fixed allocations have not been able to be increased. We have not received increases to our departmental reference levels to enable us to do that. So that's why this increased capital investment that the minister has spoken to is so critically important, because it enables us to go further down the priority list of fix-up projects. I recognize it doesn't go to your issue, which is the maintenance cost that harbour authorities have, but it does help us get at fundamental repair and rust-out issues earlier in the cycle, which we believe would help address maintenance issues.
Yeah, yes, it will, because the harbour authorities have been extremely successful. They were very opposed when they were introduced, but they've become now a critical part of the management of the resource. And I've been hearing a fisheries protection program. What's your views on the adequacy of protection provided to the various species that you manage, that your department manages from an enforcement perspective? Because while we've done great strides in conservation in some particular areas, the fishers will say that the department's efforts in protection is not adequate or keeping pace. You can generalize. I'm not looking at specifics.
You're talking more like on the conservation and protection.
Yes, no, that's what I am talking about. Yes.
Program. I know we have. I think just about 110, 109 locations, across the country carrying out compliance and monitoring to protect fisheries, fish habitat, and species at risk and aquaculture. This work is accomplished through the use of compliance and monitoring tools, including land and sea-based patrols. Aerial surveillance in some areas. Actually, I was invited to go on a surveillance this summer where they do the Greenland, the offshore fisheries out there out of Iqaluit, and intelligence gathering and sometimes investigations. I think we have about 525 frontline fisheries officers, including I think about another 33 officer cadets that will graduate this year. And these officers are also supported by, approximately 200 contract and Aboriginal fisheries guardians. And those are successful programs both on the east and the west coast.
Could you, if you don't have the numbers now, but could I get access to, or could you provide me with, how does that level compare to, let's say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? I know you wouldn't have it now.
Yeah, but I'll give you a shout.
Okay.
Let you
Good.
know.
I would like that number. Do I still have time, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you do. You have quite a bit. 2 minutes.
One of the areas that's always difficult to manage, and certainly is controversial, and I would like for you to comment as the minister, not as you as the individual, is on the whole area of quota allocation, and how your approach is going to be as the new Minister of Fisheries in looking at quota allocations, particularly by district and by area. Could you comment on that as the minister?
I think it's one thing. That was the second thing that everyone in the industry I met with had in common, is that they all felt that
they'd all have an opinion,
didn't have their
wouldn't
fair share of the quota, right? I think and what I told them, we're going to look at stuff based on science. Excuse me, and based on going through whatever species it is, there's advisory committee of stakeholders in that area, like, you know, like for northern shrimp, for example. You know, we'll sit down with them and look at how it will be, you know, divided up based on the science. You know, I think the one thing, you know, that I have committed to is, you know, I want to ensure that, you know, we have a system in place that everyone agrees with. You know, they may not all like it, but, you know, they'll all agree with it. And two, one that it has certainty, so it's not going to change. You know, I'm not going to go in and change it tomorrow. You know, that I think there needs to be the ability, you know, for that process to determine what those quotas are to be strong and in place, and you know, and you know, so it makes it more difficult, you know, for someone like me as the minister to go in and fiddle with it and change it. So I think, you know, these are discussions that I'm having, and I have been having with industry on, you know, how can we move forward and strengthen that.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Mr. Strahl, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Returning to the Cohen Commission, I guess we're a little British Columbia heavy on this side. Outnumber Mr. Hardy 2-1, but I was interested when I would like to thank your staff. I think at the public servant level for responding to my order paper question. I have another one in on the Cohen Commission as well, and we'll note that, as you've indicated, 31 of the 75 recommendations were underway. Perhaps previous government should have done a better job of talking about that, because I think there was the impression that nothing was being done, which obviously was not true. You know, after the report came out, we had two of the biggest runs of Fraser River sockeye in history. So I'm not suggesting another report is what you need. Another judicial inquiry will bring back the fish, but it certainly it was interesting to see that after such a stunning collapse, to have within just a few years a stunning increase, record runs, and it certainly increases the mystery around what happens to these sockeye when they leave the river systems. But I want to go actually to freshwater fish marketing. Give you some time there to find that tab. If the polls are correct, which we as politicians know not to trust them until all of the ballots are counted, but the expectation is that there will be a change in government in Manitoba tonight, which I know on this side of the table we are quite, not on this side of the table, perhaps on this half of this side of the table we're excited about. Brian Pallister, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba, has indicated that he intends to withdraw from the freshwater fish marketing corporation regime. If he does that, will your department work to quickly wind up that operation, or because I believe that he would be the last one standing essentially as part of that organization? So maybe just a couple comments on that.
I have to wait till tomorrow, I guess.
Okay.
No, but I mean, you know, whatever, you know, I think it's premature to you know, respond either way. But, you know, the one thing that, you know, I would say from a departmental perspective is, you know, whatever direction is going in, you know, there are the needs of the commercial fishermen that need to be met, and there needs to be some stability there, and you know, not just Manitoba, but Alberta and the BT as well. You know, so I think, you know, whatever direction goes forward with whatever government, you know, the needs of those commercial fishermen, you know, ensure that those needs are met.
Okay, I did want to talk about an issue about as far away from British Columbia as we can get. You touched on it, northern shrimp, last in, first out, as you know, was a policy that came into being under a previous Liberal government, was supported by the previous Conservative government, and of course we're now seeing when the last in, first out was actually used last time to reduce quota, there was, you know, people that had entered under those terms were very upset about it, and there's now varying positions being put forward by the inshore and the offshore fleet as to who provides more economic value, who has the greater number of jobs for the region. So I understand that the science, and there's been no change here, I would argue, and I think officials would back me up on this. The science has always determined what the total allowable catch is, and so there's no argument to even close Area 6 or when there are significant reductions in the biomass. But so the science can make that determination. You have to make the determination on who gets to fish it, if anybody does. So how, I know you've set up a consultation mechanism, but how do you ensure that there's not political interference in that process when there are both groups, both the inshore and offshore, are making compelling cases that, you should honor the agreement, you should look at a new agreement? How are you going to ensure that there's not political interference and that you are making that decision based on the evidence when the evidence is so contradictory?
Well, I mean, the evidence, as far as the science on the biomass is down. That's not a secret. And you are correct that both the inshore and the offshore are polar opposites on last in first out policy. I mean, we made a commitment to review that policy, and I've met with them, and but the one thing they do have in common is they both want to ensure the sustainability of the stock for the future, because it's in both their interests. And I said, use that as a building block. You do have something in common. I assured them that it'd be set up as a ministers' advisory panel. It would be independent. It would be done in an open and transparent manner, and that panel would do its consultations, do its work, and provide me with a report and hopefully I'm hoping to have that report by the end of June, and no decision is going to be made on any allocation for SFA 6 until after that.
Okay, thank you. Just before I get to my last question, I did want to ask as well, you mentioned you'll be going to British Columbia and providing an update or perhaps a way forward on Cohen in terms of progress on the recommendations which had been met already, which were outside of the department's purview perhaps, but I'm hoping that can be brought back and given to the clerk so that he can distribute that to us as well after you've done that work. And I did want to, while I had you, what is the current status? Another issue that you have to make a decision on is the Arctic surf clam allocation. Just wondering if you can provide an update to this committee as to when you expect that review to be complete and when you will be relaying that decision to proceed or not with an increase in quota will be given to stakeholders.
Okay, I think, as you all know, I made a decision in December to leave things the way they were for this year, and to look at more science before making a decision whether to allow more entrance into that fishery. This work is underway right now in conjunction with the Offshore Clam Advisory Committee. I think they're meeting next month, sometime in May. And as part of that process, a science meeting on Arctic surf clam will be held in June to review the available science information and assess the potential approaches for a spatial management plan for that fishery. And I think managing fisheries based on robust scientific evidence, it is a priority for this government, and I won't be making any decisions on new entrants until this work is done.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Strahl. Mr. Stetsky, you have the floor.
Yeah. Have you given the Coast Guard instructions for the date that you want to have Kitsilano open and running, and will it be before the busy summer season coming up?
Be May 1st.
May 1st?
For search and rescue, yeah. And then the other stuff will continue on. They've got to refit the building. That work is going to go on during this year. And the other enhancements will be going on over the next year and a half as well. But there will be people on the ground there May 1st.
Okay. Thank you. There's some interest in establishing a science public advisory panel, at least for the West Coast, so that to better inform decisions moving ahead. Is there some interest? Would you consider that for at least the West Coast, sort of a science advisory panel for the ministry?
Yeah, maybe. I know we have a peer-reviewed science process right now where we'll get data, and that's actually helped us in, in a number of areas that whenever we do our science, it's shared around, with other groups to be able to review and, ensure that we got it right. But maybe let's ask Ms. McLean if she would like to elaborate on that.
Sure. As the minister noted, we have a peer review challenge process for the science undertaken by the department now, particularly that for stock assessments. In terms of an advisory process, the minister spoke earlier to the importance of partnership with the additional funds that will be coming to the department this year. So I know broad consultation on the priorities for the science and how best to accomplish them, I think would be very helpful to our organization. So we'll be reaching out not only within DFO and the federal science family, but to academics and other institutes. The minister has also noted traditional knowledge as an important contributor to the science that's undertaken. So we'll be wanting to reach out broadly and make sure we've got the best information available to provide advice to the minister.
Okay. Yeah, very important to move ahead with science. Marine conservation strategy, can you lay out a little bit how that's going to roll out?
Oh, sorry. I mean, I think as as I said earlier, I'm working together with my colleague, Minister McKenna, Minister of Environment and Climate Change, developing a plan to be able to achieve this. And, we'll be launching, hopefully that, like I said, I think in the next 3 to 4 weeks, if not sooner. So can't really say anything until that. But there will be...
Potentially you'll be out consulting with Canadians and over the next year.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, earlier, I think, everyone, to my surprise, wants to help us achieve these targets. And, I assured, all the different stakeholders, all the different jurisdictions, there will be an open, transparent, and consultative process.
In infrastructure, main estimates has an increase of almost $291 million related to federal infrastructure. Can you help me out here? What sort of infrastructure projects do you have in mind on the list?
I think it'll be, like I said, the small craft harbor portion of it, our Coast Guard vessels, the offshore fishery science vessels, other smaller vessels, the SAR search and rescue vessels are included in there, and also investments to improve our infrastructure and our assets across the country that will help us enhance our ability to achieve our mandate, to ensure that we're supporting service delivery and operational requirements. I think, the Coast Guard over the last number of years has had to make some pretty tough decisions, and I think, some of that maintenance has fallen behind. So here we're looking at, doing this investment to make up for some lost time. We have some
primarily upgrading existing infrastructure.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Tetsky?
Okay.
Well, we have about 4 minutes left in this meeting. We do have 4 votes to do. Minister, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate that. And to your officials as well, Mr. Muldoon, Mr. Rosser, Ms. McLean, Minister, Ms. Thomas, and Mr. Morrell, thank you very much for joining us here today. And we'll move on now, quickly move on to getting into our votes. The votes concerning, of course, the main estimates, which are mandatory. Thank you, Minister. Pursuant to Standing Order 81.5, my sincere apologies. Minister, did you want to wrap up something? I overlooked you. I apologize.
No,
Shameful, I know.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for your questions. Also like to thank my officials helped get me ready for this, and my parliamentary secretary, Mr. Cormier, who keeps me up to date with what you guys are doing. And I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again. I look forward to it. And again, thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Minister Tutu. So, again, pursuant to Standing Order 81.5, the main estimates 2016-17 votes 1, 5, and 10 under Fisheries and Oceans were referred to this committee on February 23rd, 2016. I'm now going to proceed with the vote. Shall vote 1 under Fisheries and Oceans carry? On division. Shall vote 5 under Fisheries and Oceans carry? On division. On division. Shall vote 10 under Fisheries and Oceans carry? On division. On division it is. 3 votes down. Shall I report the main estimates 2016-17 to the House? Agreed. Agreed, and will do. Thank you, committee.
Do you know when?